Hello, hope you like the name of this video. I think it would be more appropriate and less offensive than my original title, which would have been something like Covid-19, a blessing or a curse. Of course, a pandemic is not a blessing whatsoever, because it has infected and killed millions of people worldwide, and there is no one on this planet who would actually welcome a pandemic with open arms. Would you? Well, one of the reasons why I wanted to make another video is because firstly I had not done one in a while, and this is also the first video where I'm going to film without a script whatsoever. So if you look around me, I don't have a script in view or hiding anywhere, so to speak. Most of my, well, in all of my Japanese language videos, I had to I read from a script in order to make my diction and my dialogue easier to understand by the viewers. But this is just a brief recap of my opinions on 2020 so far, because the majority of people despise this year, that it's been pretty much a big letdown. Plans have been cancelled, other things have been, things have been cancelled, plans have been cancelled, plans have also been altered, and the current pandemic with its lockdown restrictions and several tiers of rules and regulations has made everything seem so inconsistent, so to speak. I'm just going to give a brief recap of why I think there is a silver lining in this year's Covid-19 pandemic, and I'm going to list some of the positive things that I actually enjoyed out of this miserable year. You don't have to like it or agree with it whatsoever, but a few positive things have kind of occurred this year as a result of having a pandemic that has pretty much grounded thousands of flights, changed millions of plans, and pretty much altered the economies of they have altered half of the planet's economies. If you think about it, the national debt for the UK is just over £2 trillion for the very first time. And basically what that means is that is the amount of money that the UK government have in debt. This may sound very high, but if you come to think that many democratic first world companies have much similar higher levels of debt. Even Japan has a debt of almost £3 trillion. I don't know how to translate it into yen. Oh dear. Okay, so let's start. Currently, my job goes under the category of key worker, which means that I still have to travel to London every week to work for my job, and I'm not being furloughed or being made redundant. I'm pretty much in a good position in that I still have a current, consistent, full-time job. But the only difference is that I just have to work at least one day less a week and work fewer hours. Unfortunately, it doesn't make my work much more quieter and more relaxed. However, as I don't work in the nursing or hospital sector, I don't even know how that relates to the current NIH staff have to work full time during the course of 2020. How my work life has been affected this year. So the first 2 months, January and February, is pretty much average in terms of work. So I was very busy. I was earning more money because I had to do more overtime. I had to deal with more customers, people, and we had several visitors coming to my workplace because my workplace involves politicians and visitors from outside dining and eating either a 3-course meal or a quick snack. In a way, it was pretty much more stressful for me because I had to deal with several people and although I was working longer hours and I was being exposed to more stress inducing moments, I was actually earning more money and had access to more. I was able to travel abroad as much as I like, meet as many friends as I like, meet as many friends as I can. Just after middle of March, when the national lockdown was introduced in the UK, that entirely changed. Those first 2 months, they may have been more stressful and more work, and much of my time was related to work. I had pretty much a high level of consistency in that I can pretty much predict what was going to happen. I was able to react to it much better because if I knew what was coming, I could prepare for it much better. Do you understand what I mean? Just that with the current lockdown, the number of rules, regulations that are being altered and amended on a weekly basis makes it difficult to plan ahead and to decide what's going to happen. If you compare the first 2 months of 2020 compared with the last 2 months of 2020, it's a bit like a line graph or a roller coaster with a big ascent and a big dip. It's because with the first 2 weeks first 2 months of normal life, 2020, I was pretty much had more work, more stress, more business to do at work and socially, and in the end I was earning more money and more access, and I would have to, as well as travelling and socialising with people. But after the lockdown, I pretty much had received less stress due to the fact that I was working less hours, being exposed to less people, less workloads. But the negative part, of course, is that I was earning less money. I had less freedom as we could not travel abroad safely, nor could we meet large groups of friends, nor go to social events such as bowling, pub nights, away days. Quite simple social stuff. Oh, so difficult. It's at least one of them a week, but due to the ongoing state of lockdown where pretty much most of the British public are in limbo because they've got no idea how to plan ahead with their social lives and their commitments and achievements. Because it's quite hard to plan ahead if you don't know what will happen and what the future will hold. So you could perhaps plan a trip to Switzerland next year in April, but once you've booked all your holidays and finished all your written all your travel plans and your itinerary, the government would say that, sorry, all travel to Switzerland is off for the next 6 months. Sorry about your holiday. You have to work out the refunds all by yourself. and I still keep in contact with some of my friends, but the problem is that if you just text them or call and ask them how they're getting on, they're just going to give you the same response or answer they'll give you when you last contacted them a few weeks before, like, I'm just at home minding my own business, biding my own time. I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with keeping in touch with friends, but when you try and keep in touch with people too much, or do it on a regular basis, you notice that these patterns that nearly everyone that you want to contact would most likely be in a state of limbo. They can't do much, they can't travel much, they can't socialise much. You have to be slightly more creative with how you're going to keep in contact with your friends, and likewise, if you do it too much, then people they get put off by contacting them because they know that their friend is just going to give you the same response over and over again. And there's a very rare incident which is not a good incident. I'll tell you a personal thing that happened to me last month. And basically it's a person who I met before lockdown. It's not a close friend, it's just someone I used to go have a meal with in Chinatown sometimes, and he's just a very nice middle-aged man who was quite a talented musician. But last month he tried to text me on a Facebook Messenger, and he's just given off an anecdote about Japanese grammar, and I basically applied to him with something like that's good to know, and he kind of misunderstood it, and he sent off some kind of bombardment or barrage of continuous messages about comparing English and Japanese societies, and half of them weren't entirely accurate because he had some of the stereotypes were correct, but the other ones were not. And this happened over the course of 3 days, and one day he sent me over 50 messages unprompted or unprovoked, and they were getting more and more serious and personal. And they got to a point where I said, I'm going to block you because you are saying all these weird, unusual things to me that I don't want to read, and you're making me feel uncomfortable. And after that message, he started getting more rude, telling me that I should not be learning Japanese because I'm not an emotional person. I do not understand his culture. And he said to me that I should listen to him because he's a humble Japanese man. And in the end, I said I have to block you because that's just wrong. And I don't want to contact a person again. But the reason why I brought that example up is just that it shows you one of the negative impacts of being stuck at home on lockdown, because sometimes it can change people in different ways. Either they'll change them for the better, in that someone could become a talented chef, musician, artist, crocheter, due to more time indoors, but it can also change someone's mental state as well, and they could actually become more touchy, more horrible, more ambiguous in terms of their way of thinking. Another silver lining that I kind of enjoyed in this year was the short period between late March and late April, where pretty much nearly all the streets in London were deserted due to the enforced lockdown measures. And the scene kind of reminded me a bit like the beginning of the film Avengers Endgame, where pretty much half of the world's population was decimated, and nature was slowly healing itself as a result of less human settlements. Well, if you think about it, the number of the amount of carbon emissions has actually dropped as a result of the worldwide lockdowns that occurred over the pandemic. But a few things that you need to know that just because the carbon levels drop by a little bit does not mean that the climate change is not going to happen at all. Unfortunately, two things is that a slight drop in carbon emissions won't do a thing to reverse climate change. It will still happen nevertheless, unfortunately, unless there's some serious worldwide intergovernment well, it won't happen unless several governments work together to actually end climate change. And the second thing is that even if the emissions do go down, they'll still be offset by a number of people travelling off and using a lot of carbon, such as travelling excessively, socialising, as to try and catch up the lost hours and the lost days that they wasted due to being stuck at home doing nothing at all. And they would want to do what many people like myself would do, try and catch up with all their friends, travel back to their home countries, and cross off a bucket list of world travel, etc., etc. Even if COVID-19 is magically gone in one day, the whole world's not going to recover just like that. Even if they do eradicate coronavirus, what they should do is pretty much pay attention to the silver linings that myself and other people, other bloggers and other outspoken people have mentioned as well, and pretty much use some of the things that occurred during the lockdown to try and make this planet a better place. Even if the number of carbon emissions have decreased due to decreased air travel, they should try and encourage people to keep it like that for a while. Try to keep the reduced travel as this kind of status quo, or basically stretch the transition date to when air travel becomes until air travel becomes an everyday normality as it was last year. So this is hard. I'm filming this video just after the government have announced some so-called Tier 4 restrictions, which pretty much mean that, well, to put it nicely, this whole country has gone pairs up. And I'm not blaming the government in particular, it's just the pandemic mostly. Just to summarise this whole video, I was just mentioning all most of the positive parts I received during the I start again. To summarise this video, I wanted to mention all of the positive aspects that I uncovered during the lockdown and most of 2020, and pretty much most of the spare time that I was unwillingly granted due to this ungodly pandemic. I pretty much had more time to do a bit of cooking, do a bit of read more books, and for the first time this year I was able to cook more Korean and Japanese food, and now I've started to look into baking as well, and for the first time this week I managed to bake a Battenberg cake, which is actually one of my favourite British sweet. Well, it's actually a cake. And not just that, I did cook a large number of Japanese style pancakes called dorayakis, which are basically two pancakes but with a filling in the middle. And standard Japanese one has red beans in the middle of the pancakes, but I tried to make my own fillings last week using a mixture of strawberries, mascarpone, and some sugar. And it really pays off. Just the only problem is I can't really share with a lot of people, which is one of the costs of this awful year. So I hope you understood the gist of this video, where I tried to explain the minor positive things about living under the pandemic and the lockdown. And if you have done any constructive things during your increased spare time, then I applaud you a lot. So I will wish you a Merry Christmas. I'm sorry if some of your plans have been cancelled or altered due to Tier 4, Tier 5 or Tier 111 restrictions, but that I cannot help personally, so sorry about that. And I do wish you a very happy New Year as well, because as you may know, everyone certainly deserves a happy New Year. So, bye.